The night before I was supposed to try on my wedding dress, I found a flash drive in a gift bag with a note that said, "You deserved every second of it, legend." I'd just gotten back from a final fitting consultation in town. The air in Marseille was beginning to cool that late spring crispness, with sea salt clinging to your skin even when the sun disappeared. As I stepped into the apartment, my heels clicked across the old terracotta tiles, and there it was propped neatly against our doorframe, a small white gift bag crinkled at the edges with gold tissue peeking from the top. I thought Damon had forgotten something for me, maybe an early surprise. He'd been trying to be more romantic lately, little breakfast notes, flowers in my office voicemails, with old jazz songs we both loved. I smiled a little and bent to pick it up. The tag was the first jolt, to the wildest groom-to-be. You deserved every second of it. L. I stared at the looping letters. L, not Damon's handwriting. And only one person ever signed their name like that, Leandro Vega. Damon's best man. His shadow, the eternal instigator. I brought the bag into the kitchen, the smell of lavender from the open windows, mixed with something metallic I couldn't place. Maybe it was just the pressure building behind my eyes. Inside the bag was confetti gold stars, cheap and sticky, a plastic Groom Squad pin, a silver eye mask with Final Night written across the front, and at the very bottom beneath the glitter and gimmick, a pair of black silk boxers. I picked them up and immediately recoiled. They were used. My fingers were trembling. I told myself maybe it was a stupid prank, a drunk dare, boys being idiotic. But then I saw it stuck to the inside wall of the bag. A flash drive. No label. Just cold plastic and silence. I didn't hesitate. I plugged it into my laptop, the one Damon and I used together to plan our wedding seating chart last week. There was only one file. I clicked it. It began like any typical bachelor party video. Loud music. Shaky camera. Damon's smiling shirt half-buttoned dancing in a bar I didn't recognize. People I didn't know were cheering. Then came the champagne pour, someone shouting, "To the king of the night." Then someone lifted Damon onto a small stage. At first I could still breathe. It was ridiculous, yes. Embarrassing maybe, but forgivable. Until the camera followed him off the stage, into a private lounge, where 3 women waited. Leandro's voice off camera laughed. He's not gonna remember a damn thing tomorrow, except he did remember. Because one of the women turned to the camera and said his name. "Damon, you're a legend." I slammed the laptop shut. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd faint. He had kissed me that morning, whispered that I was his forever, told me my eyes looked like the sea that made him fall in love. I sat in that quiet kitchen, the scent of rosemary still lingering from last night's dinner, and I stared at the boxers, the glitter, the cheap mask. It wasn't just what he did. It was the way he came home like nothing had happened. Have you ever sat across from someone who's looking at you like you're their world, knowing full well they just burned yours to the ground? What would you do if you were me? Would you confront him? Would you scream? Or would you, like I did, sit perfectly still and let the silence sharpen into something deadly? Let me know where you're listening from. And if you've ever found yourself holding proof of betrayal in your own hands, tell me, did you say something or did you wait like I did? Because some storms don't announce themselves. They just start with glitter on the floor and end with everything gone. He wasn't the type I usually fell for. That's the first thing I should have remembered. I met Damon Holloway 6 years ago at a literary fundraiser in Bordeaux. I was there editing a translated poetry collection. He was on the panel for wine sponsorship, representing his family's century-old vineyard, Chateau Holloway. I remember his voice before I remembered his face, deep, slow-paced British accented French, with a touch of charm that made even the most boring sentences sound like an invitation. He offered me a glass of 2007 Saint-Emilion, said something about poetry being fermented thought, and I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I'd never met someone so sure of his own charisma and somehow still disarming. Damon always knew the weight of his presence in a room. His eyes stayed on mine longer than necessary, and yet it never felt aggressive. Only curated. Like everything he did, from the way he folded his pocket square to how he tilted his wine glass just enough for the light to reflect. Damon didn't enter conversations, he staged them. But I didn't mind. Not then. By the end of the night, we were sitting on the balcony, feet kicked off, talking about Nina Simone rainstorms in Italy and what it meant to feel seen. We began dating 2 weeks later. It was magnetic at first, weekend drives through Provence cheese tastings in Lyon, impulsive kisses near riverbanks. But Damon wasn't just a man of romance. He was structure, certainty, precision. Everything I thought I needed. I was chaos in a second-hand linen dress. He was the sharp edge that made everything feel steady. When we moved in together after a year, I thought we were becoming something permanent. Damon's world was marble floors and inherited cutlery. Mine was cluttered desks and paperbacks falling apart at the spine. And yet, he made room, or so I thought. Then came Leandro Vega. Damon introduced him as the brother I chose. A wild Argentinian French blend of sarcasm, nightlife, and expensive shoes. Leandro never just entered a room. He stormed it. Always too loud, too drunk, too familiar. He called me la sérieux the first time we met. Said it like a compliment, but I knew better. He'd show up unannounced, dragging Damon to yacht parties or champagne tastings with influencers I'd never heard of. Sometimes I wouldn't see Damon until the morning after, reeking of sweat, and rose cologne, muttering, just Leandro being Leandro. Still, I tolerated it. I even smiled at the dinners, poured wine for their inside jokes, let them rattle on about last-minute flights to Ibiza, while I scraped burnt lasagna off the oven tray. I told myself I was being mature, understanding. That Damon needed balance, and I was the calm to his storm. What I didn't see was how much I was shrinking myself to fit. 3 years ago, when Damon brought me home to meet his family in Surrey, I wore a white blouse and a navy skirt. His mother, Isabel, looked at me with polite assessment, like she was reviewing a candidate for an internship at her family's legacy. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. That night over dinner, she asked, "So, Serena, are you more of a career girl, or do you see yourself building a home?" I answered both. She smiled, took a sip of her rosé, and changed the subject to gardening. Damon never noticed, or if he did, he never mentioned it. His father, Raymond, said even less, just the occasional grunt of approval or disapproval, always delivered through a raised eyebrow and a dry cough. Damon said they were old-fashioned. I said they were distant. He laughed and kissed my forehead. "Give them time," he whispered. "You're already mine." I believed him. I believed him when he said he'd never had a woman who challenged him like I did. I believed him when he promised we'd raise kids on the vineyard's south plot and name them after poets. I believed him when he held me during the funeral of my father and said, "No matter what happens, I'll always be the one who stays." So when he proposed last summer under the blue parasols at Les Calanques, I said yes before he even knelt. It was a small gold ring with a marquise diamond, simple, timeless, elegant. Like everything about Damon. Like everything I thought I wanted. We began planning the wedding almost immediately. Venue scouting near X. Dress fittings in Lyon. Cake tastings, invitation proofs, budget spreadsheets. I spent hours picking calligraphy and linen colors, while Damon negotiated the wine list and curated a 5-course menu with a private chef. And in the middle of all that beauty, none of it felt fake. That's the part that haunts me now. He kissed my forehead before bed every night. He ran me bubble baths. He left notes in my books. Even 2 nights before his bachelor party, he made me breakfast in bed and said, "I still can't believe you chose me. Neither can I now." Because for all the vows we rehearsed, all the dreams we sculpted, all the quiet rituals we built, it took him 1 night, 1 room, 1 series of careless choices to make it meaningless. They say the worst kind of betrayal is the one you never saw coming. But I did. Pieces of it. Whispers. Patterns. The laughter I ignored. The instincts I silenced. I just chose to look away, not anymore. Bang Chung. He kissed me like he hadn't just torn the world we built to shreds, and I let him. The morning after I watched the video, Damon came home humming. He had taken an overnight train from Nice, or so he said in the voice message he left me at midnight. Said the bachelor party was eventful but tame, and that he missed my voice in the morning. When he walked through the door, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, he smelled like bergamot and mint toothpaste. Clean. Scrubbed. Almost too scrubbed. "Bonjour, mon cœur," he said, smiling as if nothing had happened. I stood there in the kitchen holding a cup of tea I couldn't taste and nodded, just nodded. Not a single word. Damon didn't notice the way my grip tightened around the mug handle. He went on about how Leandro had too many opinions on tequila, how someone lost their shoes, and how apparently his phone died after midnight. All said between jokes, kisses on my cheek, and fingers brushing my arm like he was trying to re-establish ownership. I let him talk. I studied the shape of his face when he lied. I'd never needed to before. That day, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe properly. But I did watch. He left his bag by the hallway. I waited until he was in the shower to unzip it. Inside were clothes folded too neatly, a bottle of cologne he never wears, and tucked into a side pocket, a receipt. Hotel Mirabeau, room 308, 3 guests, champagne service at 1:17 a.m. He'd written client meeting over the top of it in pen. I took a photo of it, saved it to a private folder on my phone. That night he cooked dinner. Risotto with lemon zest grilled sea bass. He lit candles, poured me wine. "You've been quiet," he said softly, his eyes searching mine. Tired, I smiled. A little. His eyes lingered on mine for a beat longer, but then he moved on talking about how his parents wanted to review the wedding guest list again. Isabel didn't approve of the Montpellier. She said they were new money with no discretion, and all I could think was, "You want discretion. I have it. I am it." After dinner, I excused myself and locked the bedroom door. Told him I needed to edit a manuscript. What I did was log in to our shared cloud folder. Damon was the kind of man who backed up everything: Google Drive, Dropbox, even iCloud. I had access to all of it. He once said, "We shouldn't have secrets. It's the foundation of trust." The irony almost made me laugh. In the deleted folder, I found a backup from his phone synced 2 nights ago. There were photos. Blurry but obvious. Him shirt unbuttoned sitting on a couch between 2 women. Leandro in the background holding a bottle grinning. A text string between him and someone saved only as T. I knew that was Leandro. T-bro, she was into it. "Wildest night ever. Don't tell me you're catching feelings." D haha, nah. "Just guilt maybe, but Serena will never know. Promise." I stared at the word, guilt. Then I stared at Serena, my name, so easily typed, so casually dismissed. And he was right until that moment I hadn't known. I downloaded everything, saved it twice, transferred it to a private email I hadn't touched in years. I also started listing vendors: dress designer, cake studio, florist, venue, the cancellation policies, the deposits we'd lose, the ones we could reclaim. I calculated the emotional cost like I'd calculate a project budget. It helped me stay calm. Damon came in around midnight. I pretended to be asleep. He kissed my shoulder, whispered, "I love you," and I didn't move. Not long after, I began noticing more pieces I'd ignored before. Like the time he accidentally left his phone face down at dinner and never once picked it up when it buzzed. Or the team-building weekend that ended with him not coming home until Sunday midnight, smelling like salt and bourbon. The odd hours, the slippery answers. The nervous laughter when I asked if he and Leandro ever got too wild. He always made it sound like I was imagining things. Always smiled, always kissed my forehead. I'd chalked it up to charm. But charm, I learned, is just a better-dressed version of avoidance. I didn't tell anyone, not even my sister, not even Celine, my best friend since lycée. Because once the words left my mouth, they'd become real. And I wasn't ready for real yet. I needed to stay in the quiet a little longer, observe, confirm, prepare. Because something inside me had changed. I wasn't planning to forgive. I wasn't planning to explode. I was planning to disappear. Quietly, precisely, permanently. He made reservations for a future I no longer believed in. The next morning, Damon booked a call with the wedding photographer. I heard his voice through the thin glass doors of our office, warm, certain, laughing at jokes the woman made about sunset lighting and first-look shots. "Yes, she's elegant, but she'll surprise you. Serena's got this timeless confidence." He meant it. I could hear it in his tone. That's what unsettled me most. He still thought he was the man I loved, and I still looked like the woman who did. I sat on the couch with a journal in my lap, blank pages. I wasn't writing anymore, just flipping them one by one, listening to how the paper curled and slapped back in place, like slow applause for a scene I never agreed to act in. Damon walked into the living room and kissed the top of my head. "We're all set for next Sunday," he said. "Sunset photos, the Cliff Garden. It's going to be perfect." I nodded. "I trust your vision." He smiled. That evening, while he was in the shower, I checked the drawer where we kept our wedding folder. Invoices, booking confirmations, fabric samples, seating charts. I took photos of every page, forwarded them to my private email. Then I pulled out a blank sheet and wrote 3 words, "Check the flash drive." I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. The next day I met with the dressmaker. Delphine had spent months stitching lace and satin into what she called a modern cathedral. It was supposed to arrive at Villa La Forêt Bleue in 2 days. A staff member would steam it, hang it in the bridal suite, and take photos for her portfolio. I told her plans had changed. "I'm not sure the wedding's going ahead," I said, calmly watching her eyes widen. "Could you hold delivery for now?" She hesitated. "Is everything all right, mademoiselle?" I smiled. "Everything is exactly what it needs to be." After that, I went to the train station and booked a one-way ticket. Early morning departure to Nice. 2 hours away down the coast, nestled behind olive trees and winding cliffs, sat the place I'd first found online 2 nights ago. Villa La Forêt Bleue, a boutique resort overlooking the sea. Private terraces, no questions asked. The kind of place people go when they need to forget their names for a while. When I returned home that evening, Damon was on the phone with his mother. "I know, maman, but the Montpellier are already on the list." Serena said he stopped when he saw me, covered the phone. "Are we okay with dropping the Montpelliers?" I gave him a soft look. "Do whatever makes you happy," he beamed. Later that night, we had dinner with Leandro. I didn't want to go, but I needed to see him. Needed to look the man in the eye who had recorded that video, who had handed my life back to me like it was some inside joke. Leandro greeted me with 2 air kisses and a loud compliment about my lipstick. He was all smiles, his blazer too tight, cufflinks sparkling like they had something to say. Over wine, he launched into stories about the bachelor party, careful ones, clean ones. Damon laughed a little too tightly. "I barely survived the champagne crawl," he joked. "Barely," Leandro echoed, grinning at me. I met his eyes, held the stare, and I smiled back slowly like a knife being unsheathed. He blinked. I said nothing. When we returned home, Damon kissed me goodnight and fell asleep quickly. I didn't. I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, spinning shadows across the walls. Every gust of wind from the open window felt like a whisper, "You know now." I got up at 3 a.m. and began packing. 1 suitcase, neutral clothes, comfortable shoes, my laptop. A flash drive with duplicates of everything: video, screenshots, receipts, texts. I didn't touch the joint bank account. I didn't take anything that wasn't fully mine. I folded his note to me from our engagement day, the one where he wrote, "Let's build forever," and slid it into the trash. I booked a cab to pick me up at 5:00 a.m. The train would leave at 6:12. At 4:30, I stood by the balcony one last time. Damon stirred in bed, mumbled something I couldn't hear, and turned away from the empty space beside him. I whispered goodbye, though I didn't mean it, like people usually do. Not a wish for well-being, just a recognition that what we pretended to be was over, and I wasn't asking for closure. I was writing it myself. When I zipped my suitcase shut, I wasn't packing to escape. I was packing to reclaim myself. The morning air was soft and cold against my face when I stepped outside. Marseille was still asleep, its shutters closed, the bakeries dark, the sea not yet awake enough to shine. The taxi waited at the curb like a silent witness. I didn't look back at the apartment. Inside that space were 6 years of shared groceries, shared weekends, shared apologies and phone chargers. Inside were my notes, in the margins of his novels. His ties in the drawer I once cleared space for our toothbrushes, leaning side by side like they belonged to something permanent. But nothing about it felt permanent anymore. I left the wedding folder on the kitchen table. On top of it, I placed the flash drive. And beside it, one sentence written on the back of our last seating chart: "Play the video. Then ask yourself who you really are. No accusations, no anger, just the truth." Wrapped in silence. The driver helped me with my suitcase. He didn't ask questions. I appreciated that. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, I caught a final glimpse of our balcony. The plants I had overwatered. The chair Damon never used. It looked like a photo I didn't want to develop. At the station, I stood on the platform watching the train slice through fog as it approached. Everything about the morning felt too gentle for the weight of what I was carrying. My phone buzzed twice, in my coat pocket, Damon's name. I silenced it without reading. The train was half empty. I chose a window seat. Watched the buildings shrink behind me, watched the water appear and disappear between tunnel shadows. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I felt still. At 8:10 a.m., I checked into Villa La Forêt Bleue. The concierge greeted me by name. No one asked about a wedding or a fiancé. Just a solo guest with a week-long booking and a request for no disturbances unless urgent. The room overlooked the ocean. Pale cream curtains, seafoam walls, a terrace that opened onto a view too wide for words. I stood there for a long time watching the waves like they owed me something. I unpacked slowly, careful, precise. My laptop on the desk, the notebook next to it, the flash drive tucked in a drawer, its twin. I boiled water for tea. Sat down on the edge of the bed. Listened to the silence. It wasn't loud. It wasn't terrifying. It was mine. Around noon, my phone had 14 missed calls. 10 from Damon, 3 from Leandro, 1 from his mother. A few hours later, another came through from Isabel. Serena, dear, we're all quite worried. Damon says you've disappeared. I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. Please let us know you're all right. That was the word she used, misunderstanding. As if betrayal was just a bad translation. I turned the phone off and placed it face down on the desk. Later that evening, I opened my laptop and began writing. Not to him, not to them, to myself. A letter, a document, a beginning. Because when you walk away from something that pretended to be love, you don't just abandon it, you excavate it. You pick through the remains. You reclaim your name from the wreckage. That night I slept with the balcony doors open. The breeze carried the scent of salt and pine, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't dream of wedding bells or silk shoes, or lies dressed in tuxedos. I dreamed of quiet, and I woke up free. The revenge wasn't loud. It was surgical. I spent the first 24 hours at the villa resting, breathing, watching the sea move without urgency. But by the second morning, I was ready. I didn't want to destroy Damon. I wanted the truth to walk in ahead of me and do what truth always does, rearrange the room. So I began. First, I opened my old Gmail account, the one I hadn't used since university. It still bore my maiden name. No one from Damon's world would recognize it. Then I created a series of scheduled emails. The first went to Isabel and Damon Holloway. No subject line, no explanation. Just a Dropbox link to the flash drive contents and a single sentence: he is not the man you raised. The second went to Maison Clerval, the exclusive French wedding magazine that had planned to feature our ceremony under their Modern Legacy series. Damon had submitted us, of course. The photo shoot had been arranged for the weekend after the wedding. I wrote, I suggest you cancel your story. The groom has an unusual definition of loyalty. Attached evidence. The third went to Société Ventore, a luxury wine consortium Damon had recently signed with for a distribution partnership. Their founder, Emmanuel Lartigue, was notorious for being image-obsessed. I wrote, you may want to reconsider your association. Enclosed is material not suitable for public relations. Lastly, I sent a private message to Solène, my best friend, the only one I trusted to hold the truth, without setting it on fire. I didn't tell her where I was, only that I was safe, and that if anyone asked about me, she should say nothing. She replied within minutes. Whatever he did, I hope it haunts him. Then I logged out of everything, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. By noon, Isabel had replied to the anonymous email. Who are you? Is this real? A second message followed an hour later. Serena, please, call me. We need to talk. I'm so sorry I didn't respond. At 4:20 p.m., Damon called again. Then again. I didn't answer. But I did receive a message from a number I didn't recognize, likely his assistant. Hi, Serena. Damon is extremely distressed. He's at the vineyard. Please let him explain. Let him explain. Explain what that his betrayal came in high definition, that Leandro narrated it like a Netflix special by early evening. I received a final alert. Maison Clerval had updated their Instagram. We regret to announce the withdrawal of our July feature couple. We believe love should reflect integrity. Thank you for understanding. One domino down. The next morning, Emmanuel Lartigue himself called my anonymous line. I didn't answer. He left a message. Whoever you are, thank you. He's off the list. Indefinitely. I listened to that one twice. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt clean. That night, I allowed myself a glass of wine, not Holloway vintage, and sat on the terrace. The moon shimmered over the water, and somewhere down below a boat engine hummed quietly, fading into silence. The next morning, I made one final move. A single package, a velvet envelope. Inside it, a printout of the seating chart from our wedding file. On the back, I'd written, "You rehearsed your vows with a woman you didn't deserve. Now you can sit with that." I addressed it to Leandro Vega, hand-delivered to his design office in Paris. He would open it. He would laugh maybe, or sweat, or deny. But he would know he was no longer untouchable. Because when men like Leandro spend their lives mocking consequences, the worst punishment is realizing someone out there is finally unafraid to name them. The day after, I received an email from Selene again. Damon is spiraling. His parents are furious. Leandro deleted all his socials. Also, Chloe from Maison Clairval DM'd me. She says thank you for the heads up she was on set with them next week. Guess not anymore. I read her message while stirring honey into my tea. It tasted like finality. Later that afternoon, I booked my next stay. Arles, a quiet flat near the edge of town. A place to start over, not just physically but creatively. I would write again, maybe publish again. But this time, the story wouldn't be about us. It would be about a woman who didn't scream, who didn't beg, who didn't make a scene in the rain. It would be about a woman who left before she was broken. And no one saw her coming. They built a world on charm and lies. I introduced them to silence and truth. It took less than a week for the image to collapse. On Thursday morning, I received a message from a former colleague of Damon's, someone I barely knew but who had once sat across from me at a wine tasting and complimented my reading glasses. Serena. I don't know what's happening, but Damon's been pulled from the Société Venturée campaign. Emmanuel is furious. Something about ethical concerns. Just wanted you to know people are talking. People were always going to talk. I had simply made sure they had something honest to say this time. By that afternoon, Leandro's name was trending on a local PR gossip board. Not globally, no scandal-worthy exposé, just small ripples. Whispers that he had encouraged inappropriate behavior, that his social circle was compromising to clients. Nothing confirmed. Nothing loud. But enough. Enough to make his carefully curated brand of elegance crack. Maison Clairval scrubbed all mentions of the Holloway wedding. The article page was taken down. The teaser images archived. The only thing left behind was a soft caption on their homepage. Not every union is meant to be immortalized. And then came the voicemail from Isabel Holloway. Serena, please. We had no idea. If I could go back, if I could undo the pressure, the pretenses. My son is not well, and I can't fix it. There it was, the first admission. They had built Damon like a cathedral, perfect arches, towering expectations. A bell tower no one could climb without falling. And now, for the first time, they saw the cracks in the stone. Raymond Holloway, according to Selene, had called a meeting with the Vineyards board. Damon was placed on temporary leave from all public-facing events. Press inquiries were rerouted. Investment partners wanted clarity. Shareholders demanded restoration of confidence. And what about Leandro? He posted one last photo on social media, a blurry skyline captioned, "Some things you can't explain." Then his profile disappeared. Gone. Selene texted me on Saturday, saw Leandro at Le Jardin, alone, drunk, talking to himself. People were whispering. I didn't stay long. I read that while stirring cream into my coffee. I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. That same night, Damon tried again. A long email this time, carefully written. No blame, just regret. He used words like ruin, shame, forgiveness, and twice love. He ended with, "If there's anything I can say, anything I can do to undo the damage, I will. Please, just speak to me." But there was nothing left to say. You cannot unburn a house just because you miss the warmth. Later, I opened a new document, title, "The Quiet Exit." The first sentence: he didn't cheat because he stopped loving me. He cheated because he never learned what love required. I sat back, letting the words settle. The room was filled with evening light, soft gold on linen curtains, the faint rustle of waves through my open window, the kind of peace I used to beg for. I hadn't gone looking for revenge. But sometimes telling the truth is the most subversive act of all. Because Damon and Leandro had always been protected by reputation, by charm, by circles that laughed and excused and patted them on the back. They were used to women forgiving them quietly. I didn't scream. I didn't slash tires or send angry voicemails or show up sobbing in public. I simply left. And in doing so, I took something they never thought I would: control. I no longer needed to win. I just needed to be gone and to let the consequences echo behind me like the sound of footsteps leaving a ballroom before the music ends. The world wouldn't remember Serena Moreau as the heartbroken bride. They'd remember her as the one who walked away before the altar, before the veil, before the performance. And that silence, that absence, it said more than any vow ever could. Sometimes the softest exits leave the deepest echoes. 3 months later, I lived in a sunlit flat above a bakery in Arles. The morning smelled like butter and stone. Children played in the street below my window. The woman downstairs watered lavender pots that lined the front steps, humming something in old Provençal as she moved. No one here knew my last name. No one asked why I left Marseille. I told the post office my name was just Serena, no surname. I told the landlord I was a writer returning from a long break. Both were true enough. I didn't hide. I just stopped explaining. In the evenings, I walked along the Rhone riverbank, past mossy bridges and stone arches older than betrayal itself. I carried a leather notebook. I wrote small things at first, descriptions, dialogue, pieces of memory that no longer burned. Then came longer lines, essays, letters I would never send, pages that bled with clarity, not anger. The first piece I finished was titled The Fiancé Season. It wasn't a memoir, it was a map of every woman who has loved someone beautifully and watched them dismantle that love with ease, a map of silence sharpened into precision, a map of how to step out of the performance, remove the costume, and walk barefoot out of the theater before the curtain falls. When it was published by a small independent press in Avignon, they asked if I wanted a photo with my bio. I declined. Let the words speak. Let the silence remain. I sent a copy to Solène. She messaged me one sentence. I read every page and never once doubted who wrote it. I didn't keep track of Damon. Not directly. I heard things. Whispers, forwarded messages, polite updates from people who weren't sure whether they were gossiping or offering closure. He had moved back to Surrey for a while. His parents were re-evaluating his role. Leandro had gone abroad. Someone said he was in Portugal, or hiding. But me, I wasn't hiding. I was home. Some nights I still heard his voice in the cracks of memory. The way he said my name when he was tired. The way he poured wine and hummed along to Nina Simone, like the world owed us nothing but music. But those sounds no longer hurt. They were just echoes. I had stopped asking why. Some betrayals aren't meant to be dissected. They are meant to be outlived. Now I wake up alone and reach for nothing but sunlight. I make coffee in silence and taste every drop. I read slowly, write when I feel like it, and love nothing more than the moment before the page turns, because closure is not confrontation, it's peace. And peace is not what you find in someone else's apology. It's what you write for yourself in a language only you understand. Mine began with leaving, and ended in not looking back. If someone can betray you with a smile, you owe them nothing, not even a goodbye. I used to think walking away was weakness. That silence meant surrender, that not confronting someone face to face word for word meant they won. But I know now silence is a form of resistance, a kind so powerful it cannot be interrupted. When you leave without slamming the door, without begging to be understood, without throwing a single plate, you leave with your dignity intact. I never wanted Damon to suffer. I wanted him to notice the absence, to sit in the echo of everything I didn't say, to look at a table set for two and know why the chair across from him is empty, to read our names on a canceled venue contract and remember he was the one who crossed the line. The truth is, I didn't need to ruin him. I needed to remember me, because sometimes what saves you is not revenge, it's removal. It's saying I do not accept this version of love. I do not subscribe to this distortion of loyalty. I do not belong in a story where I have to bleed quietly just to stay. And when you choose that, when you walk away, not out of rage but clarity, the power shifts permanently. This wasn't a story about heartbreak. It was a story about reclaiming my voice without raising it. So if you're listening now and you've ever been betrayed so calmly it almost felt polite, this is your reminder. You don't have to stay where the truth doesn't. You don't have to beg for answers from someone who already showed you who they are. You are not dramatic for choosing distance. You are not cold for protecting your peace. And you are never wrong for walking away from a table where love comes with a side of shame. What did you think of this story? If you were in Serena's shoes, would you have done the same? Let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And if you believe Serena did the right thing, vote number 4. If you think she should have confronted Damon directly, vote number 9. Don't forget to subscribe to EN True Tales for more powerful stories about truth, silence, and self-worth every single day.